Good evening and welcome to Tripping on Legends, your campfire on the crossroads. I am Christopher Balzano.
I'm Deanna Mulhern.
And we are talking episode 121. No heads are better than one. You were supposed to have some kind of reaction. I've got a really dramatic way to start the episode. So I'm just going to go right into the dramatic part. We're a little bit... How long has it been since we recorded an episode? I was watching it. It was the Irish one. I think it was the last one we did.
It was like a month ago.
So it was definitely not a month ago.
2 months ago.
It was not a month ago. Have you ever been to Pensacola?
Where is it?
Where's Pensacola? It's in the Panhandle.
I've been to Destin.
Yeah, I think it's kind of near Destin.
Yeah,
I don't know.
maybe.
I kind of lose all perspective. All right. Near Pensacola, Florida, near the Pensacola, Florida Lighthouse, there is an island just off the shore called Santa Rosa Island. And at times, it was completely barren. Whether it was because of storms or whether it was because, there was really nothing out there, nothing would grow out there. It was an island that whatever was there, was there. But because of its location in the Gulf of Mexico, because of the currents, because of its proximity to the land, ships were always getting destroyed.
There's a lighthouse there?
Now there's a there's a Pensacola lighthouse right near there.
Oh.
You're not supposed to interrupt me during this part. Okay. This is the little dramatic retelling thing.
Oh, okay. Try harder.
I was being extremely dramatic. Which also meant that it was a haven for pirates. Pirates raiding all throughout the Gulf of Mexico, all down the west coast of Florida, the Gulf Coast as we call it. They would find their way back up there. And oddly enough, because of that, there seemed to be great fishing.
Great fishing?
This is going to be a theme throughout the entire show.
Fishing?
Shipwrecks and fishing. Okay?
Like castor rail fishing?
Probably not castor rail, more of like pull stuff up kind of fishing.
Okay.
There was an English ship that was taken over by pirates.
Wait, Santa Rosa?
At Santa Rosa Island.
What are the Columbus ships?
The Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria.
Oh, okay.
Nothing like that other than the word Santa, which means saint, by the way. Aren't you Italian?
I didn't say I didn't know what Santa meant.
They killed the captain. They killed all the members of the crew. The only two people that were left alive were two English women that were on the ship. One of whom was the daughter of the captain. They took the two women to the shore of Santa Rosa Island, and as the ship took off, the people who were left with the prisoners decided they would get a little frisky. But the women were not having it. They fought back, they tried to run away, at which point they were decapitated.
The women?
Mm-hmm. So now, if you are on Santa Rosa Island on a moonlit night, you will see these two women walking around, arms flailing, looking for their heads that they will never find. That is what we're talking about tonight.
Okay.
That is the battle zone, right? Because you hear a story like that. The very first thing I heard a story like that, and I thought, I know you've gone back and listened to all the archives.
You're talking to the audience.
Oh yeah, no, I'm talking to you.
Oh.
I know you've listened to all the archives, and so we've done several head episodes, or we've done one head episode.
Head episode.
Okay, so first of all, we should probably say there's going to be, I think we should do an over-under right now about how many head jokes we do tonight. So where do you think we're going to lie in terms of like...
I don't think I'm going to do any head jokes.
You're not going to do any jokes? Okay, so I'm going to do 27. So we'll put the over-under at 10. I'm going to write this down officially. Episode 121, there's going to be 10 jokes
All right, I'm taking
about
under.
you're taking the under. Okay, well that's silly because I could just make 10 right now.
Then how do we do over under then? What's
So
that even
speaking
mean?
of the archives, okay, normally I'm one of those people who's not like, okay, let's get right into like the story, like
No, you're
let's
not.
put the business stuff aside. That's not what I meant. I said that in reverse. We do need to actually do some business, right? Halloween season is over. I'm back. I'm personally back in creative mode. I don't know what mode you're in, but I'm going to be producing a lot of stuff. I've got more videos made. I'm talking to you at all times.
Okay.
Unless I go like this, I'm talking to the audience. An important thing that I need to say is that we had to switch our servers. And so I had to go in, I had to edit because our server was going out of business.
Oh.
So everything was going to be erased, everything was going to be changed.
Okay, so this is where you plug the where they get them.
No. What? What? Where
Patreon?
No, I'm not doing Patreon right now. I'm just saying that like now, because we had to do that, where you can get the show has changed.
Oh.
Right? So we are now on all platforms. So we're actually on Amazon Music now. We're on Spotify. Our joke used to be we're on everything but Spotify. We're on both those platforms in addition to iTunes. But the important thing is if you were subscribed to iTunes, you have to go resubscribe because it's technically a different feed.
This is still called
so
the same
it's still called Tripping on Legends. You'll know it's different because it'll say Tripping on Legends and then it'll say Crossroads Media underneath it. But if you go and you look for the old feed, or if you had subscribed and you're wondering why you haven't gotten an episode in a little while, we've actually released 2 episodes that never made it to iTunes with the old
bonus
server.
Special?
No, screwed up.
Sorta.
Screwed
Hey.
up. Like
Wink,
no,
wink.
they're there, but they were just never like distributed. So
Bonus special episodes.
if you're enjoying the show, if you enjoy the show, and especially because we're going to talk a lot about episodes, we're going to talk a lot about Head, but we're also going to talk a lot about episodes that happened already or reference back to. This is an excellent time. If you haven't, why not spend the holiday season catching up on Tripping on Legends, right? We are at episode.
Encouraging your friends and family.
We are episode right also, and then maybe we can do what Deanna wants to do. We do a Patreon or something, and then you're going to find that we have more than 121. So we have probably 150 original episodes, some of which are actually still video in the new feed. So you can watch the video of later episodes or listen to the audio if you don't want to look at us while we're doing it. I wouldn't say that my looks are at least not a selling point. Please do that. As while you're doing it, you might as well subscribe to or follow us on social media. We're at facebook.com/Tripping on Legends. We are on Instagram at Spooky Tripping and on TikTok too. So the good thing is I've been able to expedite my TikTok. I can do them a lot faster now, so I'm putting out more.
Oh, boy.
Well, you're tagged in about half of them, so way to keep up with things. You're back in the flow of it now. I've got you back in the fold, and I'm gonna present a whole bunch of stories for you tonight.
Okay.
Some of which are kind of sketchy whether we can legend trip.
Okay.
Some of which are like, dude, we need to go here and do this. So one of the things.
The last time we talked, it was about Ireland. You
Right.
still haven't taken me.
Nor have you taken me to Ireland. We haven't even given me Irish food or potatoes. I just mean like that as a general thing. I didn't want to do a strike against Irish people.
No, aren't you Irish?
But this.
You're not Irish? Isn't everyone Italian Irish?
This
No comment.
This episode was one of those things where I was actually planned before Halloween. I had some things that I was like, oh, here we go. And then the research got derailed because of the storm. For those of you guys who don't know, because, the last couple episodes, I don't know, we suffered a hurricane, so that delayed us. And then we got into Halloween, and then right after Halloween, there was another tornado, another hurricane. And so this is like the first time you and I have sat down in probably 4 or 5 months, believe it or not.
Wow.
And we haven't had that many episodes, but hopefully, whether they're with Deanna or not with Deanna, like solo ones, no offense, we're going to be able to produce more. So you're going to want to follow us on social media because we got a lot of interesting, exciting things and events that I'm not going to bore you with because by the time you hear this, it's probably already passed. So, for example, I'm at Spookala this weekend.
I'm not gonna bore you with.
I will advertise the Southwest Florida UFO and Paranormal Convention,
What month is that?
which I'll be posting. That is in January, so it's like the second or third week in January. I don't have the date with me right now because it's on the phone, which we're using for that. So, but we've got interesting things coming up, so you want to follow what we're doing on those social media platforms. That first story, as I was reading it and as I was researching it, and you asked how many stories we were doing tonight, as you were looking over my folder of research, you were like, "Oh my God, how many stories are?" That's you were asking me like, "Oh well, hey, wait a minute, how many stories are we actually going over tonight?" I can't believe this froze on me. And the question is, the answer is,
a lot.
I've got a whole bunch of stories that we're going to touch upon, but some of them are just for context, and some of them are kind of reaching back to old episodes. So as soon as I heard that story, you might remember this from having been just in, like hearing me talk way too many times, the Crying River, or the Singing River, the Manatee.
Yeah. So
do you remember the other story, like the not Native American story? Do you remember the pirate story about that? Do you want to share that?
No, you're so good at it.
Oh, thank you. So there's this singing that you hear in the Manatee River. It was one of the very first. I don't know how the episode. It's gotta be like episode 10 or something like that. And there's this very romantic story about a Timakuan and a Calusa, and they fall in love, and they can't be together because
this when they do
she's
like
gonna.
the Olympics.
No, that's not. That's in Silver Springs. It's good that you remember that though. They actually end up together in this one. No one dies except for her ancestors, who all killed themselves, and that's what the singing is. So it's a romantic story with a lot of with a genocide thrown in there for good measure, but the other part of it is a pirate, right?
Okay.
And the pirate kidnaps Carmela or something like that, and she is the daughter of a commodore in the Panhandle, right? And he kidnaps her, and he holds her. His name is the Butcher, I remember. He holds her in his cabin, right? And he strings all of the windows in the whole boat with like guitar string and harp string and stuff like that of all these things he's stolen, so that when the wind blows, it makes music. And he thinks that that's going to make her fall in love with him, because when you're holding a woman against her will, just show her your Spotify.
Yeah, that music gets you.
It does. It's the music of the soul, which is why as soon as he goes away, just in this story, the person goes away. As soon as she goes away, she escapes from the cabin and blows up the whole ship. And she blows up the whole ship. She ignites first of all, she slams some holes in the hull so it starts to sink. Then she sets all of the the gunpowder and stuff on fire. And she goes back to the top, and as everyone's screaming and jumping off the boat to their death, because you can't, it's a river, right? It's a pretty wide river. She's singing with the music as the ship is going down, and that's what
So she goes down with
She goes down with the ship and dies, and so it's a lot of these similar themes going on. It's kind of one of those things where we're going to talk about themes tonight, because I know we're going to get to we're gonna honor the story, but we're going to see a lot of these same little elements in all of these stories come up time and time again, right? There's some kind of fascination we have with headless ghosts.
Wait, who's headless in that story?
Well, no one, except for the fact that I'm saying
that doesn't fit the theme.
It's the captain's daughter, and the commodore's daughter.
Yeah.
Right? They keep her against her will.
Every woman
he
is
goes
a daughter.
away. It reminded me of the story
okay.
enough to mention.
Next.
So,
on topic.
You're hilarious. So a lot of these themes are seen throughout. So we're gonna, as we go through some of these stories, many of them we're gonna touch upon this idea of torture and murder.
Well, you said they're not all pirates, though.
They're not, and it's funny because I was looking back saying we haven't done a lot of pirate things at all. As far as I know.
Scared of boats.
Okay, so if you don't know, I do have this fascination that I have a past life, and that past life are things that I'm scared of. So I'm not scared of boats. I just
You
have.
want to stay away from
I don't
them,
mind.
so-
No, I don't mind being on a boat. Like I love boats. I've been fishing on a boat, and my ex-wife and I we used to go on a boat, like with her father and stuff like that. Like I don't mind boats. I love the
Yeah, but
Key
you don't
West
really
Express.
want to
but
legend trip boats.
right, there's something
Mhm.
there's something about mixing those two things, and I think it's death in boats
Okay.
because I believe that I used to be a fisherman,
And you died on the
and
boat.
I'm not sure I died on a boat, but I know I was a fisherman, and I know I died of a drug overdose in Gloucester.
I was gonna say
Yes,
that.
in Gloucester, because you remembered, or because
It just came to me.
just
Well, maybe because we're
I
from Massachusetts.
probably and I have said it before,
No, I
so I
think
don't
it's
know
because
if
we're
you
from Massachusetts
and that's you
there's
think of
like a-
fishermen, you
yeah.
think automatically of Gloucester.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Drug
The perfect
overdoses
storm
a
and
little bit.
well, right. I don't want this to be an episode about
No,
my
I don't
fears.
or drug overdoses.
Or like otherwise we'll take it to the couch and I'll
Yeah.
lie down and you can analyze me. But yeah, when I went to Gloucester, I knew where every street was. Like I knew what was going to be around corners and stuff like that.
I think this is true.
And Gloucester is one of those
I've never
coastal
been there
towns.
either.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's one of those coastal towns that
Can you
the
tri-
shipping industry went down, and when the shipping industry went down, all those people turned their boats into drug boats.
Yeah.
And so a lot of them ended up becoming addicts. And so there is an entire
Will you
section.
legend trip Gloucester?
I would. I have. I've loved the trip Gloucester. I already have. I mean,
I wanna
like
go
back
there.
in the day. There's an entire section of like a shanty town within Gloucester that are all the people who are still heroin addicts. Because heroin was the cheapest, it was the one that they were bringing in. And so I feel like when I watch a movie that has drug use, especially heroin, which I've never done, it looks
Me either.
familiar to me. Like it's like, yep, I know what that feels like. Like yep, I know. And it's like I don't want to watch it. You know, like I can watch some pretty horrific things. When it comes to drug things, I can't watch it. I gotta go, nope, sorry, I'm done.
Past
So,
life.
so that's what makes me feel like it's a
Yeah.
past life. So I do have an aversion to it. And it's interesting, though, that a lot of the pirate legends are not, and I'm sure there's plenty of them that are like that, but they're the pirate legends that I always come across are always on the shore. Right? They're always like having to do with the buried treasure, or like when they've come to shore and they've changed professions or something like
all
that.
those ones we did in Lover's Key. Didn't we go?
Key West?
No, remember in
We did go over to Lover's Key.
Bonita Beach or Lover's Key. Or
Yeah, but that was
out
just
there.
us hanging out. That wasn't like a
There was
legend trip.
there's pirate stuff there though. Oh, because I brought the research. That's
Oh,
why.
okay, all
Yeah,
right.
and you
We
didn't
never got to that.
Yeah,
We never actually got to that research. It was such a nice day. So let's talk about being headless. Speaking of Lover's Key, let's talk about being headless and
no problem.
these things. It was funny because you opened up my folder, which I don't know what page you opened up to of this, but you went, oh, like the Headless Horseman,
Oh, Sleepy Hollow.
like Sleepy Hollow, but that wasn't actually anywhere in there, right?
No.
Like you didn't actually see it there, but you think as
That's
soon
what
as
you
we
think
think,
of.
1870, Washington Irving writes Sleepy Hollow, right? Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It's not called the Headless Horseman, even though that's what people know it as.
Oh, because it's a kid's,
It's kind of like when
it's
I
a
talk
kid's story.
when I talk to my students, they always
Called
call it
Sleepy
they always
Hollow.
call it Rapunzel. They never call the movie Tangled, right? And so
No, you mean the opposite? The new kids call it Tangled, but we call it Rapunzel.
no, they call it Rapunzel. I'm like, there's no such movie called Rapunzel. They're like, yeah, with the girl in the hair, and I'm like, I know who Rapunzel is. It's called Tangled. They go, oh yeah, it's whatever, Tangled. So in the same way, we think it's called Sleepy Hollow or the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I mean, the Legend of the Headless Horseman or the Headless Horseman. It's actually not. It's called the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is where it takes place. What do you remember about that story?
Sleepy Hollow?
Yeah,
Um,
the Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
the Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
I love that story, by the way. As a story, forget about the plot and everything like that. I love actually reading it. I love the way that he writes, like with this like
He
weird.
wasn't really headless,
old
was
school
he? Did he just have like
sarcasm.
a pumpkin on his head? Did he? Was he really headless? He wasn't.
We are near Orlando, I guess, close enough to only go the Disney version, but no. So
I
he's
can't remember,
he's a
yes.
former Hessian soldier,
You know what it kind of reminds me of is Yankee Doodle. No, yeah.
like the movie Yankee Doodle or the
Like
song.
who wrote into Paul Revere?
Paul Revere.
I get all of those.
You're
confused
literally
too.
from Braintree. That's awesome.
I'm from Weymouth.
Weymouth, whatever. So the story is, as people know, it's there is a legend of a soldier who I believe got his head taken off
Could
with
have
a
been Paul
cannonball.
Revere.
Was not Paul Revere. Post Paul Revere.
Yankee Doodle.
1870s. That's like 100 years past the time. And so he is a soldier who gets his head blown off, I believe, like taken off with a cannonball, and he still roams the countryside, especially this one path of road leading to a bridge.
Sending a message.
In that story, and I'll talk a little bit about like what themes of headlessness are. Yeah, I mean, I think they're probably the themes that I'm going to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
It's widely considered, though, in the actual story, it's not anything supernatural that kills Ichabod Crane, but rather the guy who is his rival for the girl, and that he pretends
Yep.
to be the headless horseman,
Yeah.
which is why you
Right.
have the pumpkin
Yes.
instead of it,
Yes.
and all that stuff like that. And trust me,
Kind of like Tangled and
when
Rapunzel,
we-
because the real Rapunzel, the guy gets blinded by thorns, and in real Rapunzel,
moral story: don't fall in love.
but Tangled.
And so, yes,
that
yeah.
doesn't
So it
happen.
kind of changed a little bit. And we're gonna put when we put this stuff out, we're totally gonna put the Brom Bones song in there.
Wait, if I
that he
play
has
it,
on
will
No, yes. Last time in that episode, you got like some of our stuff taken off. So there are these themes that kind of go through. It is this idea that like it's tragedy and it draws us back to these events, right? So often there are these things in history we're supposed to remember, and we mark them with these headless soldiers, right? So we're talking about New York at that time. This idea of like they had just won the Civil War, these Hessians had helped us win the Civil War, and so therefore it was like this very superstitious area, and so they were calling back to that. The people who, and we've talked about this before on the show, the people who are headless are incomplete, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was this idea, especially around the Civil War, it really started to gain a strong hold of a perfect death, right?
Okay.
So if you imagine like a perfect death, you're with your family, you're able to give like that last piece of advice,
Right, you just fall asleep.
right? You're
Surrounded
surrounded
by
by
loved
them,
ones.
surrounded by them.
Yeah.
And we've talked about before that in the Civil War, it was common to have pictures or
Mm-hmm.
things that belonged to family members. And in the battlefield, when you were near death, if you had been wounded, even people on the other side would take things out of your pockets
Right.
and put them around you, so you were. But the big idea is like that was really the first war, so it became an extension of this idea. You don't have a part of your body. How can you possibly find peace in your soul if you had an arm amputated and that arm is somewhere else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you had a leg amputated. Like there would be something that would continue to draw you back. And of course, what more vital part of you
In your head.
than your head, right? So, and this is also like an insult to death, right? Your head is where you think, it's where your soul is, or like the essence of who you are comes from your brain,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Like
how
your
you
thought
can
process.
identify.
That's how you love. That's how you hate
See
all
the
that
world.
stuff. How you literally
Yeah.
and figuratively see the world, like through that part of your body.
You can survive without an arm, but you can't survive without a head.
There you go, right? And that's going to come in later when we talk about some of these other things. So you have these stories that come up, and they come up in all these different cultures, right? So they come up in Greek culture, they come up in Irish culture, especially I'm going to talk a little bit about, and they all kind of point to the same thing, right? These same kind of ideas run through it. The first is revenge. Revenge for losing your head and punishing those who have taken your head.
Okay.
Okay? I'm not sure if you've ever taken head, but someone is after you because of it.
Taken.
And it hails
Given
death
head?
or the coming of soul. So a lot of these stories, seeing a headless horseman or seeing someone without a head. So maybe this will actually change your opinion on whether we should go on some of these legend trips. When you see them, you're going to die.
If you see
Right?
a headless horseman, you're gonna
Yes,
die.
especially if they're with a horse. If you see them, it oftentimes, especially if they have a carriage with them, like they're in a carriage,
Like it's the Grim Reaper.
it's not coming to take you, it's coming to tell you you're about to die.
Yeah, because like I said,
So-
it's a message.
Yeah, it's a message
They're
like
delivering
from,
a message.
and the other thing is this
and who
idea.
says you're gonna die though? That's just a thing, like a common knowledge.
Yeah, yeah. It's like like for example, they say if you see your doppelganger, that's a sign that you're going to die. Like you're seeing some kind of
never
like
heard that.
hiccup. You're seeing some
In the
kind of
Matrix.
hiccup in the Matrix. Yeah, literally. I mean, that's how we would phrase it now. Before
Right.
it'd be like, oh my God, there's a time loop or something like that. You are seeing like a version of yourself in the future that
But
is
you're
about
not.
to die or
Okay.
whatever. And the other thing is like this idea of like you can't kill the past. So these headless horsemen, even more than other ghosts, are really supposed to, because they stress the grief or the guilt after the time of the tragedy. Like it's like something incomplete, something left behind, and so therefore it'll never be settled. But sometimes that's like actually a good thing. This idea of like remembering the past through these different headless people that kind of appear throughout. You're like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
No, I'm still stuck on the fact that like they're bringing a message, but I don't. I'm like, it's not
Well,
that you're gonna die.
Okay, so let's. All right, so I'm gonna mispronounce all of these because you've already heard how horribly I do my Irish things. The Dullahan in Ireland,
Mhm.
Which means the dark man. And the funny thing is, I had to go. I don't know if have you ever even seen this. I had to look into this.
No.
Do you know what this is?
No.
This is the OG Tripping on Legends
Aw.
book, like the first one that we opened up. It's
From, like,
hilarious to go
From
through
the
this.
90s.
From like what is it, 1916? No, 2016. This idea, all the things like I'm talking about are like right here on this. So I was actually able to find this. You can check that out on episode 50, Dead Man's Oak, which is our journey through Central Florida, trying to find where this headless person is in Central Florida.
Okay.
Because there's all these different stories about like where it was, why he lost his head. They believe he was hung and it popped off. That's one story. But then we started talking about the Dunahan. So I'm just going to kind of go over some of it. There are some things. Okay, so it's an Irish belief, and it's a demon, or it's a fairy,
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
or it's a
fairy?
ghost,
Yeah.
or it's a, you know what I'm saying. So there are
Yeah.
all these different things, but he
Mhm.
still wanders. He is the servant to someone or a god named, or like a deity known as Crom Dulal, which I'm totally mispronouncing. Now the deal is that back in pagan days, in Irish pagan days, he demanded sacrifices, right? And so they
This
would,
guy Crom did.
yeah, we'll just call him Crom for now. Even that part I'm probably mispronouncing.
Crom.
Crom. So he demanded heads,
Okay.
right? And so you would have to sacrifice
Human heads,
people.
Eddie?
Oh yeah, no, human heads. And so you'd have to cut their heads off, give them to him, and he would be satisfied with that, right? But eventually the Irish started to convert to Christianity, right? So they started to become Catholics, and they stopped doing this pagan ritual. Well, the dude still wants his friggin' head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he sent this guy out to get the heads that he wasn't getting. So when you don't get head, you send another guy out
To get head.
to get it for you, right? And so so he would roam the land, and he had no head himself, and he would behead people and steal them, and then sometimes they would also
Was he
become
on a
these headless
horse?
spirits. He was not only on a horse, he was on a carriage.
Okay. So
Right?
this is the original.
He was on a
horse.
carriage of,
Headless horse and carriage.
well, yeah, like that's kind of where the idea comes from, the way it's kind of come down to us. A lot of this came from Symbol Sage, the website Symbol Sage, and so he would kind of go around the countryside. He had his head, he had his own actual head in his arms, just like we think of the headless horseman, non-pumpkin headless horseman. Only like it would be this like fleshy thing, like with the flesh like dripping off of it and stuff like that,
Zombie
like
looking?
kind of like zombie-ish, right? And if he found you, like boom, that was your message that he was going to take you. So he was not the Grim
Did
Reaper.
he didn't have to kill you?
No, yeah, he would kill you. He would take you and kill you. So it wasn't like the Grim Reaper who, it's your time, it's time to go. He was actually out hunting. And so over time, they kind of lost the origins of what he was, but people, in folklore at least, were still seeing this guy, and so it became, if you saw him, you were going to die soon. And when you died, he was going to take it. And that kind of fits right in with, like other things. Even Ghost Rider from Marvel. Even he still has a flaming head, but it's still that same idea. This idea of like someone on a steed, something weird with their head coming to take you away. The best part is if that ever happens to you. So here's a little public service announcement. What would you do if he came, right? And he was like, you saw him, you saw his fleshy head. He was riding with his horses.
Just let him take me.
No, well, oh, that's sad. No,
Run away.
The main thing you want to do is make sure
you don't look at him.
He doesn't throw blood or dirt at you.
Okay.
If he throws blood and dirt at you, you're now marked, and he's totally like death is going to come from you. Or just dodge blood. Have you ever dodged blood? No. Well, maybe that's something you need to work on. Yes. There's also kind of almost the opposite.
7 flashbacks of dodgeball.
I know. I'm having flashbacks of
Red Rover, dodgeball.
I don't know. Like how much better would that have been if they used blood, right? Like, although oftentimes being fat and slow, blood was involved when I played dodgeball. In Norway, it used to be a tradition, and it's not like an old tradition. It's not one that's been like forsaken that long ago. You would cut off the heads of powerful people who are bad powerful. Or just people who in life were tricksters, people who in life who were bad people.
So they could be the Headless Horseman?
No. So that you would actually cripple their ghost. Right?
Yeah, but you were just saying how powerful these headless people are.
Okay, but this is in Norway where they're not how powerful. Like, this was the opposite. That's why I said this is the opposite. Like, they would actually decapitate corpses because there was this idea that if you remove the head, you remove the power from the body, right? And that's something you've seen in things before. Like, people take the heads of things. We were just talking about...
Like the King Tut or something?
I don't think King Tut had his head taken away.
Yeah, like in the Egyptians, like the pyramids, like they stole their heads. Did I make that up?
Yeah, I think you did. I don't know what movie you're watching, but I mean, what was that movie with Zorro, right? Mask of Zorro. Remember, he puts like the guy's head in a jar and like is drinking from it all the time. It's like an iced tea. Oh, it's a good movie. You should watch it. Antonio Banderas said it's best. But this is like that idea gets kind of brought down to vampires, right? Like, what do you do to a vampire? Stake through the heart, cut off the head, right? Yeah. And it was tradition and Bram Stoker heard of these kind of Norway stories, and he kind of added that to the lore of the vampires. This idea is like, if you want, there's something still powerful about a spirit or a ghost, or specifically like a ghoul. So ghouls are people who walk around trying to feed off the dead, right? Because they've got powers. I'll get to that. They've got power. So if you want a loved one to not be the product of a ghoul, you chop off the head, you cut off that power supply, and the ghoul is like, oh, that's not, I would rather have this body because it's got the head connected to it. And it's your power, everything you were saying before, the power is in your head, and so that's kind of the idea for zombies, right? Like, these zombies, they have no brain, but the power is still in the head. So what do you do to a zombie? You always shoot them in the head, or you cut the head off, and that's like the only way to stop a zombie. So this is one of those things that's like kind of been repeated and seen time and time again. And so there's this idea of, there's definitely a connection between these headless, we're obsessed with death and head, right?
You are.
And so I really am. Those are the two things that I live for in life. Death and head. So I'm going to give you 3 stories, like 3 major stories for this.
Okay.
And I cut them. There were more than 3.
I know.
And there's more than 3 actual stories.
There's a pile.
There is a pile. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to start out with, we'll say the cheesiest one, or the most cliche one. I'm going to call it cliche. Because it takes place in what is the most cliche haunted area in all of Florida? St. Augustine. And people are constantly asking me, when are you going to St. Augustine?
So
have you been to St. Augustine? You've been.
I've been.
When you were there, did you go to the Castillo de San Marcos?
Yeah.
You did? Really?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Tell me about it.
It's just like a fort with stories.
A fort? Just got like a fort. I'm so glad you bring your vast knowledge to the show again. Yeah, so a lot of the stuff that we're getting here, I got from Ghost City Tours and also from Mark Muncie's book, Freaky Florida, as well as like a whole bunch of
I didn't
other
really feel
resources that are
anything
out
there,
there.
though.
In the actual fort,
Yeah, like walking.
which is also
On
known. They
land.
switched the name. It's also known as Fort Marion.
Yeah.
So
There's,
can
like,
we
a whole,
say
like,
Fort
walkway,
Marion because it's
yeah.
easier for me to pronounce
There's a
Marion?
whole
than-
walkway on the water and there's forts, and you can hear stories.
Did you hear the stories of the headless man who was there?
I don't think so. I heard
So-
a lot of stories about kids.
Oh,
People always-
the
people
kids
always
on
wanna
the
tell me a story about
the kids on the that we talked about in an earlier episode.
I think so.
The kids that are on the new lighthouse.
Yes.
So this is the fort.
I
I don't
remember
know the
that
proximity of these things, so people have to correct me on that, or even you if you remember. Let's talk about good old black drink singer.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of black drink singer?
This is a name of a person?
Yeah, sure. You might know him by a different name. His name is Osceola.
Yeah, they do talk a lot about
which
Osceola up there.
which means
They
black
totally
drink
do.
singer.
Yes.
So we've covered Osceola a lot because
They
he
talk about it a
is
lot.
he's really the spark of the Second Seminole War, right? So
He
Osceola
has a
was,
lot to do with stuff in
he
Florida.
has a lot to do with stuff in Florida. It's a
Yeah.
huge part of our history. He was the strongest voice against the movement of the Seminoles out of Florida, right?
Mhm.
He was he was one of the ones who was really strong with the Seminoles who signed the Paine Treaty are not representative of all of us, right? He is the one who conducted the raid on Fort King, where he killed Wiley Thompson while he was out having a cigarette, which more than the Dade Massacre really kind of launched the Second Seminole War. He's a big guy in the history.
A lot
of,
is named
of
after
it.
him.
A lot.
A
I mean,
lot.
we have Osceola County, right? Like there's an
There's a
entire
lot,
county
yeah.
that's named after him.
Streets and schools.
Streets and schools, and you know, a style of bubblegum. So the fort itself was built in 1672, right? So it's like the oldest fort in the country. It's built out of that shell, kind of like half shell, half cement stuff, which is what I always mispronounce that word. What's that word? Coquina. And
You have it
so
written down?
yeah, it's right there. I just can't pronounce it still.
Yeah, you said you
And
were right.
so
According to the kindergarten.
which
Coquina.
is known throughout a whole bunch of different things to trap spirits, right? So it's known to be this highly charged spiritual.
Because it's from the sea?
I think just because of the actual chemical compound. I don't think there's like a mythical reason. Just like quartz is good, used to be good in watches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like this just happens to have this history of being able to conduct spiritual energy somehow. Goes back and forth, different hands, Spanish, American, then it goes to the Confederates for a while, then the Union takes it over again, so it kind of has the fort itself. So it has this history of a lot of violence going on there, a lot of fighting going on, and then of course it was used as a prison, right? Oddly enough, one of the things that it was used for was like the first stop or the last stop on a version of the Underground Railroad. So before
Why would it be the first or the last?
I'm glad you
stop?
asked, because before Florida was part of the United States,
Uh-huh.
Florida was someplace you could escape to as a slave.
Oh.
And so the fort was actually used for that purpose. Osceola was captured during the Seminole Wars, and he was brought to the fort as a prisoner.
Okay.
And he was really sick at the time, right? Like he had malaria, he had all these other things going on. Yes, exactly, stone tape theory. But he was a superstar when he got there. Like everyone wanted to see him. Because he was so sick, he became friends with this guy who, named Dr. Whedon, who was a doctor at the fort. Excuse me, cough button. Osceola eventually, with a whole bunch of other Seminoles, gets shipped off to Fort Moultrie, which is in South Carolina. He continues his friendship with Dr. Whedon. Dr. Whedon actually treats him, according to Mark Muncie, actually treats him while he's still there. And then Osceola dies. and is buried at Fort Moultrie.
In South Carolina?
However, before he's buried, Dr. Whedon, who is into that kind of thing, beheads his friend. Brings him back.
Just the head?
Just the head. Brings just the head back to St.
True?
Augustine. Yes. Puts it in a jar, which he displays at his store. Right? He has this like pharmacy.
Okay.
He displays it at his pharmacy.
Wow.
Right? So this is like, that's
And
how.
like formaldehyde?
So they always say, like, if you love someone, head. If he's your buddy. So,
head.
am I at 5 yet? Am I at 10 yet?
Yeah, you are.
So this is kind of like the famous story that's passed along, and they say that Osceola's ghost is seen.
Where's the head now?
I'm glad you asked. It gets passed down to Whedon's son, passed, and eventually makes it to the Medical College of New York,
Okay.
where there is a fire that destroys the majority of the building, and the head is never seen again.
Wow.
So it's believed that it actually burnt up in the fire. It's said that Whedon used to actually try to freak his kids out by saying, "Good night, kids, I love you," and then he would put Osceola's head like on their bedstand.
Oh my gosh.
So that they could like
Dad
see
jokes.
it. Yes, yeah, dad jokes gone wrong, right? And so a headless Osceola is supposed to still haunt Casa de San Marcos, which to me doesn't make sense.
Why? Because he was in South Carolina? We know that doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
he died in South
We
Carolina.
know that doesn't matter.
He's associated with the really more of the west coast of Florida and the Ocala and places
the
like
meadow.
that. And so I don't know. It seems to me like just because his head was brought there, like I haven't. So maybe it's the idea of like he was.
Where is he born? Where is his like wife or lover?
I'm glad you asked. He was actually. I don't know about his lovers. Although I do know his lover was not African American or a freed slave. I didn't find that out in my research. But he was born, I believe, in Alabama. And so there's, I don't know, it kind of like, it begs the question of where are you going to haunt? Are you going to haunt where you die?
We just thought of
Are you
this
going to haunt
before.
like where you...
Remember the Screaming Man? We talked about like, where are you going to haunt? Where you die? Like where your lover is?
Like,
or...
right, which is why we always say, like, well,
Yeah.
why is a cemetery haunted? Like, why would you haunt the cemetery unless there was a reason? In that case, we felt, or at least I felt, that the reason he was in it there was because he's like, where the hell's my wife?
Yeah.
So, does Osceola return to St. Augustine because he's like, I
Where's
know
my
my
head?
head's around here somewhere, right? Like, I know, and if so, why doesn't he go to New York?
Maybe that's too far removed.
That's... He's like, I'm not going all the way.
Well,
I
'cause he knew the doctor
recently
back
went
there.
from Florida to Massachusetts,
No,
and South Carolina. Going through South Carolina is almost as bad as getting to New York. So, it's like I feel like it's a shot. Once you get past South Carolina, I feel like it's a shot. to
Oh
New York.
yeah, because the states are so much smaller.
Yeah, although they're not,
There's
but
a
they
lot more
feel
going
smaller.
It's not all
Because once you pass south of the border, it's you're all set.
south of the border, south of the border, south of the border.
I noticed there was a lot less of them.
Oh really?
On 95, yeah.
Because the hurricane took them away.
I think more of just people don't go there.
Is that haunted?
That's or is there the idea of someone sees a ghost? It's no head. So it's not like you can say like, oh, that looked like a Native American. Right? So why do they assume that it's Osceola?
Because it makes a good story.
Because he's the most famous person
Yeah.
that died there, right? Or most famous person associated. The theory that like
Man, if
a
it's
place
another
will-
headless person, they're like, what the
a
heck?
place will always be haunted by the most famous
Yeah.
person associated with it, right? So that's kind of the first story, like, and that's probably, I would say, the most famous headless ghost in Florida is this ongoing
Osceola.
tale. But then again, St. Augustine's got this like, na 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 na, there's ghosts. Like they really pump up the whole idea
Yeah,
that
but
there
he
are.
was really headless, and he was really there, so they have the right.
They actually dug up his body in South Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
and they found that he didn't have a head. So this
Yeah.
story, now whether he actually had it on the nightstand of his kids or the bedpost of the kids,
So
whether
you don't
he
know
had
if
it
that's true or
displayed,
not?
but we do
If the
know
doctor had it?
we do know that it did make it to the Medical College of New
Oh, that's
York,
true,
and we
yeah.
do know that he took the head, right? So there are things that confirm it. there is a headless ghost. Osceola was here. They kind of just put all the pieces together for that. So if we ever go to St. Augustine, because I know you're still itching to, we would definitely have to see if we didn't see the
We were so
ghost
close
of-
that one time.
We were, and I was actually, what's her name? Lauren from Paradise After Dark.
Mm-hmm.
She literally was like, "I'm in St. Augustine. Can you come?" And I was in Ormond Beach. She was like, "Come,
Oh,
let's do it.
really?
Let's do a Halloween episode."
And you didn't?
And I didn't. We couldn't make it there. So, what do you think? Would you go to that one? Yes, because you already kind of want to go to St. Augustine, right?
Yeah.
How about the next one?
Mm-hmm.
This one could be my most favorite of them, but probably the least likely to actually be able to go to.
Okay, let's see why.
Well, just so you know, I have been working diligently to get us this legend trip. This one takes place at Seahorse Key, which is right off the coast of Cedar Key.
Okay.
So we're talking a little bit past Tampa, right? So not too far,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Only Seahorse Key, which has a lighthouse
Oh, this
itself.
is the one I read.
Yes, this is the one you're going to read now.
Oh. His special book.
It is. It's only opened like 4 times a year. It's not open for the kind of thing we want it for, and it is owned and run by the University of Florida, who use it as a research facility for conservation. Right? Like it is considered. It's a wild area now, and they use it to study these animals and things like that.
So we just need to be friends with like an environmentalist?
I have gotten in touch with them
Mm-hmm.
and approached them on several different platforms over the last couple days, and I'm dying to see if they get back in touch with me.
Okay.
Until then, we do have the stories, and we can go to Cedar Key, and there are some interesting things in Cedar Key, as we can find out. I think it's hilarious you won't take it out of the bag. It's fine. So,
Look at this.
using interlibrary alone, right? I was able to get this book. I know if you're listening, you can't see it, but it is in a Ziploc bag, which we all know as archivists, that's the way to store things in a Ziploc bag.
No. It's not just a Ziploc
So-
bag. It's in like a cardboard. It's
It has
fancier
a-
than cardboard.
It has a cardboard. It has like a binding.
Yeah, it's like a book binding.
It's like a cardboard book binding to protect the book itself. I was not able to find when this book was actually published because, as you can
I
see,
know. I was trying
as you
to
can
see
see on
that
the
too.
last page,
I know. 2000.
it says
What is that?
copyright applied for. I don't even know what that
Wow.
means. Copyright applied for. So it's at least old enough that people just couldn't get a copyright for their books. And there are a few different stories from Cedar Key which I think are really interesting. One of them involves a widow's walk, and we love our widow's.
We
walk.
love Widow's Walks.
This is the story of Beatrice Bailey Beasley and her husband Amos. And she was not an islander, right? So Cedar Key itself is not an island. It is like on the coast. But it still has like the mindset of an islander, like because she was not born like
What's a
in the
key?
town.
What is the definition of a key?
Don't ask me that. You should know that.
It's
Better than I do.
It's a little island. That
Is it?
I don't know.
Because when you look at it on the map,
What's the definition of a
Cedar
key?
Key.
I thought it
Yes.
was like a group of islands.
So this
So
is
why
Cedar
call
Key.
it not an
This
island?
is Cedar Key right here. The land is Cedar Key.
Oh, where the binding is.
Right, where the binding is. It's like this. Let's take this beautiful book and
I
right over the
know,
nice
right where
map
they-
they
right
made.
where
They're
they
putting
point
it.
to it.
So he, who is considered an absolutely daring person, right? He was a fisherman, and he went out to fish. And the day he went out to fish, like all these people went out, and there a hurricane hit. And so all the fishermen ended up kind of having this, like they stayed. I think they got to like one of the other islands, one of these other islands of the Keys, and he never made it to that, and he never made it home.
Okay.
And so she spent the entire hurricane on her widow's walk, gripped against it. Like she refused to go in no matter how high the gusts of wind got. And she was just praying and praying and crying. And she was wailing. And the people in town said she actually sounded like a banshee. Like, that's how loud and how kind of crazed it was and wild it was. Everyone else came back. He never came back. And she kind of went a little crazy after that. And she became much more of a recluse. She stayed in the house. But more importantly, whenever there was a hurricane, the people in town knew it because she would like sense it, and she would start walking her widow's walk and wailing and crying. And so people all around the town could hear her screaming like a banshee, is the expression that they use time and time again, and they knew that a storm was coming. So it said that to this day on Cedar Key, people know whether a storm is going to be really bad because before the storm comes, they'll actually hear Beatrice, even though they can't see her, from that house still, they'll hear this screaming and they'll know that a really bad storm is coming.
To this day?
To this day. So if we could find that house, that would be really cool. I wasn't able to find where it actually is, but I kind of feel like if we went to Cedar Key, we could ask around and we could actually get some more information on it. And we could also, maybe from the coast, get a little glimpse of another headless pirate. This time, the pirate is headless. So, introduce the book so that people can kind of see, like, I got it from Interlibrary Loan, but it's called
Cedar Key Legends, Volume 1.
I haven't been able to find if there's a Volume 2 or anything like that.
Why would they call it a Volume 1?
Well, if you were going to have a Volume 2, you should probably have a volume. If you have a Volume 1, chances are you're going to have a Volume 2.
Right, because otherwise you wouldn't call it.
And it's only like 5 pages.
Did you ask the library if they have more volumes?
I would not ask the librarian that. I've done the research myself and I haven't been able to find the other volumes.
Gosh. But you got it from the library.
I got it from Interlibrary Loan, and that was hard enough. It's a long story. I'll tell you about it off.
Okay, boring.
Yeah, it is boring.
By Sally.
Let me tell you a library story. That'll be interesting.
I like library stories.
I'm with you.
By Sally Tilson and Dottie Comfort. And it's from the USF Library.
Yes, which is why I'm wearing the hat tonight, like in honor of the story.
Oh, okay.
All right, I'm gonna focus this on you a
There's
little bit.
5 legends. Would you want me to read one of these?
Yeah, I want you to read the Headless Man.
Horseman of Seahorse Key.
Or the Headless Man of Seahorse Key.
The Headless Horseman of Seahorse Key.
Oh, that's what it's called. Oh, there it's called the Headless Horseman. Okay.
What did you think it was called?
It was just called the Headless Man. Other places that I've heard
It
it.
says Horseman.
Okay. Do you mind if I move this stuff so the camera can focus on you as you tell the story?
Yeah, I guess so.
All right, there you go.
Okay. The Headless Horseman of Seahorse Key. On moonlit nights, a headless horseman astride a pale palomino rides along the beaches of Seahorse Key, 3 miles from Cedar Key. So the story goes. About 1800, Lafitte, the pirate, left a fortune in treasure hidden on Seahorse Key with his trusted henchman as a guardian. Lafitte also entrusted to this Pierre Blanche, a palomino from a herd of stolen horses which he was transporting to Louisiana.
Sometimes referred to in other things as Pierre LeBlanc or LeBlanc.
Okay.
I'm just going to insert things when they're important.
Of course. I'm used to that. The horse was used to aid Pierre in patrolling the island. Pierre, marooned with the treasure and the horse and provisions, endured a long, lonely vigil. After months of solitude, riding on patrol one day, Pierre reached a high dune he used as a lookout. He saw a skiff approaching throughout the shallows. A snake hunter beached his small boat and pitched camp on the sand above high tide level.
Okay, so if we're thinking about this logistically, right?
Mm-hmm.
That highest dune is probably where they built the lighthouse.
Wait, there's
Would that
not
make
a
sense?
lighthouse though.
There's a lighthouse now there.
But not during
But
the
not
storm.
during here.
Yeah.
So you would think if that's the highest point, the dune, that's probably where they put the lighthouse.
I don't know, is that sturdy? Can you build a lighthouse on a dune? Is it just like a pile of sand?
Well, I think they use cement into the ground and stuff like that. But I would bet that it's the highest point part that I'm focusing on.
Okay, sure.
You would put... Continue.
His intent was to search the island for rattlers and moccasins, for the skins of which you could get a high price at that time.
I don't think of Florida as a big moccasin place, do you?
Water moccasin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, I'm just saying I don't think of it that way.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not, I'm just saying I don't think of
No,
it.
I remember people always talking about, like, be careful of the water moccasins.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they must
Okay.
be huge in Naples.
Are those
I don't
snakes?
know. Yeah. Water moccasins.
Oh, those red snakes? Are those water moccasins? The red snakes?
I don't know if they're red or not.
Alright, continue.
They live in the
Sorry.
water, though. Eventually, the two men became acquainted, ate meals together. The hunter Leon grew more and more curious about why Pierre and the beautiful horse were marooned on an isolated island like Seahorse Key. Leon pondered Pierre's secret reason and how he could discover it. At last, he found a method. After a supper shared on the beach, over a campfire, Leon casually mentioned a jug of corn liquor he'd like to share. Pierre was delighted. There had been months during which he had not had a drink.
Florida loves its moonshine.
It would be a great treat, he said as much. As they drank, Pierre, having accepted twice as many drinks as the cagey hunter himself consumed, became more and more expansive. Finally, he disclosed the whole story of his reason for being on the island. The treasure, the horse, the expected return of Lafitte were no longer secrets. Nothing? You don't have anything
no, that's it. That's good. You're doing a good job. Nice job.
After that evening, Leon watched in secret every movement of the pirate. One day, by stealthily tracking Pierre, the hunter discovered where the treasure was hidden under a palmetto brush on a high dune. Is this the same high dune, or is it a different high dune?
Same I do not imagine.
He watched while Pierre opened the chest, checked over and fondled the sparkling jewels and golden coins. The pirate finally closed into the chest. That's not a head joke.
No, it's just fondling the jewels, but that's fine. Continue.
At first light next day, Leon arose, fully dressed, from his bedroll. To him, this was no day for wasting time. He had work to do. First, he scouted Pierre's small camp. No signs of awakening were visible. Even the Palomino seemed half asleep as it nibbled on a patch of grass. This is a horse. Palomino is a horse.
Palomino is a horse.
Okay. The hunter ran in a beeline toward the hidden treasure. His procedure had been planned. He carried 2 large burlap sacks. The writing is really little. And at his belt, his long hunting knife. He hurriedly scrambled over the dunes, reaching the one where the treasure was hidden. He crouched, scanned the entire terrain for signs of life. None appeared. Winds had drifted sand over the treasure chest. Leon brushed it off with nervous sweeps of both hands. He opened the lid and saw what had fascinated his companion. There glittered the jewels and the coins from many pirate raids. Where should he start? He had only the 2 bags with him, and what they held was all he could carry. There was no point in lingering. With a hasty glance from left to right, seeing no moving thing within his scope, he began scooping double handfuls from the chest into his bags. Sweat broke out on his head and shoulders and ran down his back. As he worked, he became more and more absorbed. He heard nothing until Pierre's voice cut the air like an exploding shell. Whirling, Leon looked up to a face gleaming, well-sharpened cutlass held in the hand and his erstwhile friend. Still crouching, Leon's hand fell instinctively to his glittering hunting knife. He sprang from his half-kneeling position to confront his antagonist and defend himself and his booty. They circled each other.
Sorry.
They circled each other like 2 gamecocks. Both were barefoot. The sand was hot.
Okay, so this is just going to be tripping on middle school. Tripping on
I know, exactly.
Okay, continue. We finally got over, alright, continue.
As they jockeyed
continue with the gamecocks.
into his position. Pierre's cutlass was the pirate's weapon, so he, a buccaneer, knew well how to use it. Its heavy, sharp blade. Leon, the hunter, trained in swamping and snake trapping, had an inborn knowledge of, and instinct for, knife fighting in his blood. Pierre's blade was heavy to wield, but deadly. He needed space to do his best with it. The hunter's knife was like a razor.
There goes on a long description about how they fight and the preparation for it. Maybe skip to the end.
Pierre screamed, seeing his own red blood gush in an arc from his torn throat against the sky. Furious, Leon discarded his knife, grabbed the cutlass from the stand. Once slice blowing was all it took. It happened in an instant. Pierre's head rolled in the sand. The hunter picked up the severed head, placed it beside the chest. The body lay behind him, unnoticed. With unhurried hands, Leon finished filling his 2 sacks. He turned thoughtfully, glanced at the head in the sand, picked it up, and casually laid it on top of the remaining treasure. As an afterthought, he added the blood-stained cutlass. He replaced.
Wait, so he gets the treasure.
Mm-hmm.
He kills his friend, gets the treasure, then puts the head back inside the treasure box.
On top of it.
On top of it, with the sword, it's in like a mic drop kind of thing. Like.
Yeah, and he's ignoring the body. I feel like that was important.
Yeah, yeah.
He replaced the lid, put back the camouflage of palmetto fronds, then picked up his knife and burnished it in the sand. The hunter pushed off from Seahorse with his 2 bags of treasure. Laffitte never returned for his horse, his henchman, or his treasure. He was incarcerated in Galveston and was eventually hanged for piracy.
So he never came back for the treasure.
The story goes that the headless spear often rides astride the ghost of the pale Palomino, keeping faithfully a patrol on the moonlit beaches of Seahorse Key. So the treasure's still there. The treasure's still there,
unfound. Here's what I wanted, because we also have like the horse, the white horse that's at Celery Road in Sanford. Why the hell does the horse gotta suffer? Right? Like, why does the horse, and even you were talking about the headless horseman before, the other ones, right? Like, where does that death of the horse come in? I don't know. I feel like it throws a wrench into what people think about ghosts, right? Like, it's ghostly legend-wise, it clicks, and we love it, and it's like we can imagine LeBlanc.
You can't have a headless horseman without a horse. You gotta.
What? Right? How come he's just not a headless guy, like walking around the beach?
I know. Headless horse
looking for his
sexier.
It does seem sexier, right? Like, would I have even noticed the story if it was just a guy looking
headless man
for his head, right?
Yeah.
Which we are going to get to that, but it's like, well, where's the idea of like?
Yeah, are there other animals like in ghost stories?
I mean, I know that there are ghost animals. The horse seems to be like the most majestic one, right? Like the most common one, and I think I hear this more in actual like true stories of people sharing experiences, are like their cats or their dogs. Even like the Lizzie Borden house has like a famous cat ghost. You hear people all the time about their dogs coming back, but the one that seems to be, and you can go to that episode where we talk about.
It's almost like they're using
Celery
it as
Road.
an accessory.
And as an accessory, and it completes. It almost like that horse connects it back to that Irish legend of the dude walking around telling people that they're going to die, right? Or it somehow makes more sense. Why would he leave the horse on the island, right? Like, why would he? And the horse doesn't die at the same time either.
Yeah, but if you're
so unless
headless,
you're talking like a lost, they die at different times.
It's easier to have a horse to lead you.
Okay.
You know, it's hard to walk.
Yeah, but would you, if you didn't have a head, would you hop on a horse or would you try to walk around? It's not like the horse is gonna go. Because you can't talk.
Yeah, but horses.
If you're headless, to say like,
horse isn't gonna
hey,
run
giddy
into
up, horse,
something.
go. All right.
You just use the whip, the whip.
But how do you know where you're going as the driver? You're saying that the horse is like,
whoa,
brother, don't go there. Like it's.
Yeah, the horse isn't gonna
don't go there, brother.
The horse isn't gonna go into the water or the road. Or horses are pretty smart.
So you think it actually has like a utilitarian
an
thing about it, as opposed to just being like it looks cooler, or it connects to like these older legends and things like that.
No, because a guy walking around without a head looks kind of silly. He's like bumping into stuff, like putting his hands.
Oddly
out.
enough, like in Pirates of the Caribbean, when the guy loses his head, the fish guy loses his head.
It's
and
like
he's
a chicken
like,
with his head cut off.
Did?
Yeah, like,
oh, a chicken with his head cut off.
It's like
Good.
silly, but a horse is like guiding him.
I'm not sure if I saw a headless man rising from the sand, because there are actually reports of people, because once again, there's shipwrecks all over there. Some of them from Lafitte. Someone just crashed there. Which means it's great for fishing, right? So these shipwrecks, because they create these like unnatural corals, sea life gravitate to them, and so fishermen love to do it. And so fishermen have been reporting this legend for 100 years, that these stories have been going on. This idea of like,
well, but they talk about ones without horses, too.
Yes. No, I'm just saying, like, and so imagine, so one of the reports is of a fisherman, and he kind of decides to see that he's on that side of it, and he's having a pretty good day, that he's going to stay on the island, which you're not supposed to. Like, before it was a reserve, you weren't supposed to stay there. It was like cursed because of this treasure that's there that has some kind of curse on it. You might lose your head. Like, that's the story that the fishermen would say, that if you stayed on the island, you would wake up, and LeBlanc would have taken your head, right? Because he's looking for a head, and he's like,
so somebody did do
here's a head. And so that was like the old fisherman's tale used to say. And so one night, this guy tells the story, and this is on Backpackerverse, so take it for that. And he's kind of sleeping, and he wakes up to see like these fingers kind of rising out of the sand, and then the hand rises out of the sand, and the body with no head comes out and like starts crawling towards him, and he gets on his boat and he never comes back. So, and then the other thing that's often, once again, heard there are these banshee screams. So all these coastal cities seem to have banshee screams. Are we talking maybe just the wind, or because there's such a connection to like the wind really? We've suffered 2 hurricanes in the last 2 months, but this idea of like there's something haunting in the wind and some banshees mimic that. But this idea at least of
but the women screaming for their men at sea.
Well, right, except for it was always said to sound like a banshee. And then we've already had one story where they talked about the banshee, and here's another one where it's like a banshee scream is supposed to accompany this guy riding back and forth, which is lure me in, like kill me, like I want to die, or I want you to die. Come to me. That's what banshees represent. I think we can do this one.
Yeah.
There are like 2 or 3 other
How do you get
haunted
on the
stories.
key?
I haven't the slightest idea. You've got to take a boat. I would imagine there's a ferry. And like I said, they only open it up to the public. The website said 4 times a year.
That's crazy.
And the last one was in October.
Okay.
So you would imagine that.
December, January.
It's like...
January.
But I've gotten in contact with them, and I would love to be like, hey, you know what? I'd love to connect this to history, talk about what you guys do. Like, I've presented it as like,
right.
It's a win-win. Allow us to hang out in the dunes and do the dunes of the... It actually looks like, if you look at the picture of it, the island itself actually does look like a seahorse.
Really?
Which is where it gets why it gets that name. So, I think this is a very doable one.
Okay.
If we can convince them to allow us on the island. If not, we might have to get into kayaks. And like, under the cover of dark.
Is there camping?
There's a facility. It's like, it doesn't seem as if they allow people on, and when they do allow them on, it doesn't seem like they're allowed to like stay overnight.
Kayak onto it?
I don't know, like, or one of those like when you see in the movies, like the Navy SEALs are in those little things that go like underwater and they come up.
Submarine?
Yeah, like but the little like individual ones.
Okay.
That go under the water. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you never seen The Rock?
Individual submarines.
Have you seen The Rock?
No.
You've never seen The Rock, like with Sean Connery?
The Rock?
That's Dwayne Johnson. Is who I think you meant.
Dwayne Wayne.
Not Dwayne Wayne with the flip up glasses. No. The movie with Sean Connery, like Welcome to the Rock, and Nick Cage, and they have to rescue the people that are trapped on Alcatraz.
Like when you're...
Next legend.